4 astronauts are already on their way to the moon. But minutes ago, something failed. At one of the most dangerous moments of the mission, NASA lost contact with them. Not briefly, not safely.
Earlier, NASA officials said there had been a temporary loss of communications, but all was now well. Our science editor, Rebecca Morell, was at the launch site as the mission began.
In a way they still cannot fully explain. And that was only the beginning. Systems meant to keep them alive started failing one by one, including a $23 million system on day 1. NASA says everything is under control, but they are panicking. There is one truth they also have not said out loud, and when you see it, the question becomes unavoidable. Were we ever truly ready to send them? Mission Control goes dark, and nobody knows why.
We've got some breaking news.
Space Policy One orders NASA to lead a program that sends astronauts back to the moon.
On April 1st, 2026, 4 people left Earth on the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built.
3, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff.
For the first 50 minutes, everything worked. Inside the capsule, the crew floated calm, focused, doing everything they trained for. Mission Control was watching it all in real time. Then, 51 minutes into the flight, something broke. Not during a quiet phase, right in the middle of one of the most dangerous moments of the entire mission. At that exact time, Orion was performing what engineers call a burn. A burn is not a small adjustment. It is a violent push in space. The engine ignites and forces the spacecraft onto a new path. This specific burn was called the perigee raise maneuver. It was meant to lift the lowest point of Orion's orbit and put the spacecraft in the exact position needed for what comes next, which is the burn that actually sends them to the moon. This one does not take them there yet. It sets it up. If this burn is even slightly wrong, the spacecraft ends up in the wrong orbit around Earth. And that means the next burn, the one that is supposed to send them to the moon, fires from the wrong position. If that happens, Orion might miss the moon completely. Or worse, it could be pushed onto a path that takes it too far away, with not enough fuel to correct it. That means the crew is locked into a trajectory they cannot fix. They would not fall back to Earth. They would drift farther out with limited supplies and no clear way home. NASA's own program manager, John Honeycutt, had already said this was one of the most dangerous phases of the mission. And that was exactly when contact died. Mission Control lost the downlink. In simple terms, they lost the crew. They could not hear them. They could not see their data. They could not tell what was happening inside the spacecraft. And while that silence stretched, Capcom's Stan Love kept talking. He knew he could not hear them. He kept calling anyway, hoping they were still there. And they were. They heard everything. Commander Reed Wiseman, one of the astronauts, confirmed it. Every call reached them, every word, but they could not respond. That's a one-way communication. And that is not just uncomfortable, that is dangerous. Mission Control depends on telemetry to know if those 4 people are alive. Telemetry is the stream of data that shows everything happening inside the spacecraft. Oxygen levels, cabin pressure, power systems, engine performance, the condition of every system keeping the crew alive. When that disappears, they are blind, completely blind. If something failed inside that capsule during that burn, a fire, a loss of pressure, a system collapse, Mission Control would not have known. Not until it was too late to do anything. During that same time, the spacecraft started reacting on its own. The solar arrays shifted to what is called solar normal. That means they turned to pull the maximum amount of power from the sun. The system was trying to correct something. But correct what exactly? NASA says communication eventually came back.
But we had great insertion accuracy. We had a good TLI burn.
But listen carefully to how they explained it. Mission Control said the solutions that were applied to regain the communications from integrity. It is not known which one worked. So what they are really saying is this. They tried multiple fixes to regain contact with the spacecraft, and they do not know which one actually worked, which means They do not fully understand what caused it in the first place. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman then said, "We're actively working the issue. That means the problem is still not understood." At the same time, he said, "There were no issues with the vehicle itself. No issues with the vehicle. But the system that connects that vehicle to the people responsible for saving the crew failed completely." During the blackout, engineers had to switch Orion to S-band string 2. That is a backup communication channel used when the main one is not working. They also shut down KWID-19, which is part of the system that controls how data is sent and managed inside the spacecraft. These are not routine steps. This is emergency-level troubleshooting during flight. This is not supposed to happen. NASA later said the cause was a planned satellite handover. That is when communication switches between satellites as the spacecraft moves. But if it was planned, why did it break? A system designed for this exact moment failed during this exact moment. And this is where it becomes hard to ignore. As Orion moves toward the moon, it will rely on the Deep Space Network, massive antennas spread across the world. This is the only way to talk to a spacecraft that far away, and the same kind of handover will happen again. So what happens if this happens again out there? Not minutes, hours. No voice, no data, no way to know if the crew is alive. This is not theoretical. In 2023, the International Space Station lost communication for over an hour. Doctors could not monitor the crew at all. But the station is only 250 miles away. Orion is heading 238,000 miles away. Now add something even more unsettling. 3 days before launch, a powerful solar flare hit Earth. It caused radio blackouts. Solar physicist Tamitha Skov warned, "We need to pay attention to radio bursts now. Those can really impact HFVHF, as well as satellite radio communications during critical launch operations and early orbit maneuvers." The blackout happened during early orbit maneuvers, exactly when she warned. NASA has not confirmed if that played a role. So what caused this? A failed system? A hidden fault? Solar interference? Or something worse that has not been identified yet? Right now, the answer is simple. They do not know the full story yet, and the mission is still moving forward. For those minutes, Mission Control had no idea if the crew was alive, and the crew was listening to that silence. That was not just a glitch. That was a warning, and it was not the first one. To understand how this mission reached this point, you have to go back to the beginning, back to a rocket that was already under immense pressure before it ever left the ground. What NASA knew before they sealed that hatch. What the world saw on launch day looked clean. What happened before that was not. On March 12, 2026, NASA held something called the Flight Readiness Review. This is where the decision is made. Do we fly or do we stop? During that review, John Honeycutt was asked a direct question. What are the chances these 4 astronauts die? This is not a random person. He is a 36-year NASA veteran. He is the chair of the Artemis II mission management team. His job is simple. Know how safe the mission is before anyone gets on that rocket. And his answer was not a number. He said the risk is not as bad as 1 in 2, but not as safe as 1 in 50, somewhere in between. Think about that. That is not an answer. That is a warning. Because NASA has given real numbers before.
Artemis II mission is going to take the next step in our flight test campaign.
Before SpaceX Crew Dragon carried astronauts in 2020, NASA said the risk was 1 in 276. Before Boeing Starliner flew in 2024, it was 1 in 295. So why not this time? NASA already set a rule for itself. The mission must not fly if the chance of losing the crew is worse than 1 in 75. They set the safety line. Then they refuse to tell you if this mission meets it. NASA's own Inspector General estimated something even worse. Missions like Artemis could face serious problems at a rate of about 1 in 40. The Space Shuttle, across 135 flights, had a loss of crew rate of 1 in 67. This mission may be nearly twice as dangerous as the shuttle, and NASA will not confirm it. Now go back a few weeks before launch. late February 2026. Something inside the rocket stopped working the way it should. Helium was not flowing correctly. Helium is not fuel. It does not burn, but it controls pressure inside the fuel system. It keeps the fuel moving smoothly to the engines. Without it, pressure drops. Fuel flow becomes unstable. Engines can fail. NASA immediately panicked and stopped everything. They rolled the rocket back from the launch pad into the building. Engineers took it apart piece by piece. They scanned it.
Vehicle assembly building, out to the launch pad, and back if we have to.
They recreated the problem in tests. They tracked it down. The cause turned out to be a seal. A small piece of material had shifted just enough to block part of the helium flow. That seal sits inside the upper stage, which is part of the rocket responsible for the burn that sends the crew toward the moon. The seal was fixed. But here is what matters. They tested that fix again and again and again. Why? Many believe it's because they were not fully confident. If something is simple and certain, you do not keep testing it over and over before trusting it. Then, NASA made a decision. They chose not to run another full test after they fixed the seal. That test would have loaded the rocket with real fuel under real conditions. Extreme cold, extreme pressure, the exact stress the rocket will face during launch.
Crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Liquid hydrogen at minus 423 degrees. Liquid oxygen at minus 297. That is when materials shrink. That is when seals fail. But they skipped it because time was running out. So the first time that repaired seal would face real conditions again would be launch day. And that has already happened. They have launched. Now there is one terrifying question NASA isn't saying out loud. Would the seal fails again? No one knows yet. But the horror isn't even over yet, because more troubles unfolded before the astronauts left Earth. Now let's look at what is protecting this crew when they come home. It's something called the heat shield. When Orion returns, it hits the atmosphere at over 25,000 miles per hour. The air in front of it turns into plasma. Temperatures reach about 5,000 degrees. The heat shield is the only thing stopping that heat from reaching the crew. And the last time NASA tested it, it failed. During the Artemis 1 mission, the heat shield came back damaged in a frightening way. Around 100 areas had deep burn marks. Large pieces had broken off. It looked really ugly and terrifying, one scientist said. NASA did not understand why at first. It took months to figure it out. The problem was the angle of re-entry, which is the angle at which the capsule hits Earth's atmosphere coming back from space. It had come in too shallow, so the capsule spent too long inside the extreme heat zone, long enough for the heat shield to burn through and break apart. But before they even figured this out, NASA immediately set out to build Artemis 2 using the same design that failed to protect the heat shield. So what was the fix? Not a redesign, just a steeper entry angle into the atmosphere. The steeper the angle, the faster the capsule passes through the hottest part. Less time in extreme heat means less damage to the shield. That is it. Simple in theory, but it has never been tested with humans on board. One expert estimated the risk of failure somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 50. Think about how wide that range is. That is what uncertainty looks like. Now step away from the machines for a moment, because there are real people behind all these numbers and machines. Reed Wiseman, one of the astronauts, knew about all these failures. He is a widower. His wife died of cancer, so he raised his daughters alone.
Wiseman has spent over 165 days in space. More on the personal side, he's just a great guy.
Before this mission, he took them for a walk, and he told them where the will is in case he doesn't come back. Wiseman said something else before launch. He said humans are not perfect. They can be careless. He said that about the people who built the rocket he was about to fly. On April 1st, they were all sealed in. The hatch was closed, and just 51 minutes later, Mission Control lost them. But that was just the first thing the world saw go wrong. While engineers were still trying to figure out what caused the blackout, something else inside Orion had already broken. Something that cost $23 million to build, and it failed on the very first attempt. The $23 million toilet that couldn't handle day one. Shortly after reaching orbit, mission specialist Christina Koch noticed a blinking fault light on the Universal Waste Management System. The toilet? NASA's $23 million toilet. This is not a joke. That is what it cost. And it broke on its very first use in spaceflight history. Here is what failed. The fan jammed. Inside the system, small internal parts that move air and waste through narrow pathways stopped moving correctly. Something blocked or stalled the airflow system. NASA later described it as a controller issue, meaning the system that tells the fan how to operate was not working properly, so the airflow stopped. And in space, that is a serious problem. In space, the human body cannot get rid of waste the way it does on Earth. On Earth, gravity pulls waste down and away from your body naturally. You do not think about it. It just happens. In space, there is no gravity, so nothing falls. That means when an astronaut tries to use the toilet, the body cannot rely on gravity to move waste away. It does not drop. It stays right there unless something forces it to move. That is what the fan does. The fan creates suction. It pulls air and waste away from the body and into the collection system. That airflow replaces gravity. Without that fan, the waste does not go to the collection system. It can stay in place, it can drift, it can spread. Mission Control explained that the system could still take solid waste, but it could not collect urine. The part that pulls liquid into storage was not working at all. So what do you do when the only toilet on your spacecraft breaks on day 1? You go backward. NASA confirmed that at least one crew member had to use a collapsible contingency urinal. That bag collects urine and then connects to a port that dumps it into space. Koch later told Mission Control one of those bags was full and needed to be emptied. A $23 million system fails, and the backup is a bag that fills up and has to be manually dumped, and it gets worse. Before launch, Koch described the toilet herself. You have to wear hearing protection when you're in here, but we're making that work. It's just another thing we have to coordinate with each other. The toilet is so loud that astronauts need hearing protection, and it still failed. This has happened before. In 1969, during Apollo 10, a waste bag opened inside the cabin. Fecal matter began floating. The crew reacted in real time. One of them said, "Give me a napkin quick. There's a turd floating through the air." They had to chase it. They had to grab it in a sealed spacecraft. When it happened this time around, ground teams had to step in. They sent instructions up. The crew had to open parts of the toilet system. They had to access the fan area directly and physically clear whatever was blocking it. After hours, the system came back online. NASA later called it a collaborative win. But this was a brand new system, never used in space before, built for deep space missions, and it failed on the first day. If something this basic breaks immediately, what else might fail next? Because this was not just embarrassing, it was a warning. And while all of this was happening in orbit, very few people were talking about what had almost prevented the launch entirely. The no-go mission. 2 hours before launch, while 4 astronauts were already sealed inside Orion, the mission was declared a no-go. And the reason is something most people watching the countdown never heard about.
3, 2, 1. Booster ignition.
The flight termination system was not working. This is the system that destroys the rocket if it goes out of control. If the rocket turns toward land, if it starts heading toward people, engineers on the ground send a command immediately. That command blows it apart in the sky. That is how the public is protected. NASA said it clearly. Without assurance that this system would work if needed, today's launch would be no-go. And at that moment, it was no-go. The problem was a communication failure between the Eastern Range and the rocket. The Eastern Range is the safety authority at Kennedy Space Center. They are the ones who monitor the rocket and decide if it needs to be destroyed. If they cannot send that signal, the system is useless. And during those 2 hours, they could not send it. The range safety officer is the person with the authority to make that call. They hold the power to destroy the rocket if something goes wrong. But without communication, that authority means nothing. And while this was happening, the crew was already inside. The hatch was closed. 4 astronauts strapped into their seats, sitting on top of a rocket that could not be stopped if it went out of control. Then came the fix, A technician had to go to the vehicle assembly building and bring back hardware from the Space Shuttle program. That program ended in 2011, so this was basically old hardware, pulled from storage, and it was used to fix a safety system on a modern rocket in 2026. Once it was connected, they ran a test. About 15 minutes, and the system responded. The status changed from red to green. The launch happened and NASA was elated. But critics following this journey are displeased. Some are furious. What if that same failure happened during flight? Not on the ground, not when there is time to fix it. If the rocket had turned toward land and that communication failed again, the range safety officer would have had no way to destroy it. It would just head towards populated areas. That scenario is real. It existed, and they launched anyway. The FTS failure was the no-go that almost stopped the launch before it even began. But it was not the only problem, because in that same 2-hour window, while engineers were rushing to fix the system that could destroy the rocket, another alarm was already active. This one was even closer to the crew. The launch abort system. There is one system on that rocket that exists for just one reason: to save the crew if everything else fails. It is called the launch abort system. The crew is not sitting inside the main rocket itself. They are inside the Orion capsule, which sits on top of the rocket. That capsule is their spacecraft. It can separate and survive on its own. Now think of the launch abort system like an ejector system for the entire capsule, not the people inside it. If the rocket explodes or loses control during the first moments of flight, this system fires a powerful motor and pulls the entire crew capsule away at extreme speed. It separates the capsule from the rocket, carries it a safe distance away, then detaches. After that, parachutes deploy. Those parachutes slow the capsule down and bring it back to Earth, usually into the ocean, where recovery teams are waiting. That is the plan, if it works. But just 60 minutes before launch, one of its batteries triggered an alarm. NASA called it an out-of-family reading. That means the system saw something it had never seen before. This happened at about 2:33 p.m. Pacific time. At the same time, engineers were already dealing with the flight termination system failure. Two critical safety systems, both showing problems, and the crew was already sealed inside. Engineers spent about an hour trying to understand it. They concluded it was an instrumentation issue. That means the battery itself was likely fine, but the sensor reading it was not. And that is not reassuring, because now you have a different problem. The system that tells you if the battery is failing cannot be trusted. So if the battery actually started to fail during launch, would they even know? The launch abort system has 2 batteries for backup, but one of them was already flagged. That means the system was no longer fully redundant. It was operating with reduced confidence. NASA said they would apply extra monitoring right through liftoff. But what does that actually mean? This system operates in milliseconds. If something goes wrong, it fires immediately or not at all. There is no time to react, no time to fix anything. So what does extra monitoring do? It lets you watch the problem, nothing more. NASA said, NASA has reported that the LAS battery issue is believed to be an instrumentation issue and will not affect today's launch. Believed to be? Not proven, not guaranteed. And they launched anyway. For now, NASA still insists they've got everything under control. And yet, more problems kept coming up. Something else later failed, something smaller, something almost laughable. And that is what made it worse. Microsoft Outlook versus the moon. At about 2 a.m. on the crew's first day in orbit, Reed Wiseman was setting up his computer. Not a special space console, a Microsoft Surface Pro tablet, and it was not working. He said it clearly, live on NASA's broadcast. I also see that I have 2 Microsoft Outlooks, and neither one of those are working. If you want to remote in and check Optimus and those 2 Outlooks, that would be awesome. 2 Outlooks, both broken, and in the same sentence he mentioned something else. Optimus. Another software issue already known to Mission Control, 2 problems at the same time. Mission Control responded calmly. We will join in on your personal computing device and let you know when we're done. Mission Control did not just guide him through it, they took control of his computer from Earth. From Houston, engineers connected to the tablet inside the spacecraft and fixed the problem remotely. They went into the system, checked the software, and got it working again. This depends completely on communication. Without a stable link, they cannot access the computer, cannot see the problem, and cannot fix anything. Mission Control confirmed we were able to resolve the issue for Optimus, and for Outlook, we were able to get it open. It will show offline, which is expected. Offline here does not mean useless. Outlook is used to access schedules, mission plans, and messages from NASA. If it does not open, the crew cannot see that information. That is where the concern is. This software is not part of the systems that fly the spacecraft. Those are separate and built for space. Outlook is standard software used for daily operations. And in this case, it failed. 2 versions were installed. Both appeared the same. Neither worked. The fix was simple. The team simply reloaded the system files. But that only works if Mission Control can connect. Earlier, during the communication blackout, that would not have been possible. There would have been no way to fix it, leading to a loss of communication. This moment went viral. People laughed. But the real question was not answered. If a basic system like this can fail so easily, what else depends on similar software? So far, every problem has been fixed. Every problem was called minor, but there is another mission coming, Artemis 3. And next time, they are not just flying past the moon, they are landing on it. And nothing that breaks out there will be minor. Artemis 3 is next, and there is no coming back from that one. The mission is not over. Right now, the crew is no longer just in orbit. They have already fired the trans-lunar injection burn. That is the burn that sends them away from Earth for real. The engine fired for several minutes and pushed the spacecraft out of Earth's orbit and onto a path toward the moon. After that burn finished, there is no turning back. They are now on what is called a free return path. That means they will loop around the moon and come back to Earth, even if no major engine fires again. And everything that went wrong happened before they reached this point. And there is something else coming. When Orion passes behind the moon, the crew will lose all communication with Earth for about 41 minutes. This is expected. The moon blocks all signals, no voice, no data, no telemetry. If something goes wrong during that time, the crew is completely on their own. Now remember what already happened. There was a communication blackout earlier in the mission that still has no confirmed cause. Now there will be another one, this time total and unavoidable. And then comes the final test, re-entry. The spacecraft will return to Earth at nearly 25,000 miles per hour.
Had enough power to get them from the Earth to the moon, around the moon, and back to the Earth.
The heat shield will face extreme temperatures again. This is the same design that failed during the last mission. It got around 100 damaged areas. NASA changed the angle of return to reduce the risk, but that fix has never been tested with a crew on board. This mission is the test. Now look at the pattern. A communication failure with no clear cause. A toilet system that failed on its first use. A safety system fixed with older hardware. A battery warning cleared based on belief. A software system that needed remote repair. Each one handled, each one called minor. But this mission is only a flyby. The next one is not. Artemis 3 is supposed to land on the moon. 238,000 miles away, there would be no quick return and no rescue. Every system must work perfectly. And this program cannot afford to fail, because right now, this is the only system NASA has to send humans to the moon. So the question is this: if all of this happened before they even reach the moon, what happens when there is no margin left? This is not one failure. This is a pattern. In 1967, Apollo 1 did not fail because of one problem. It failed because small problems were accepted until they became one disaster. That pattern is clear, and it is happening again. There is also one thing you were never told: the real risk number. It exists. NASA calculated it and chose not to release it. If the number was safe, it would be easy to say. So why is it not being said? 4 people heard everything. They saw the data. They understood the risks, and they got in anyway. The question is not whether they were brave. The question is whether you were told enough.